Today we're going to be taking a look at a Casablanca Cambridge. The Cambridge was one of Casablanca's less popular models throughout the 1980s, and some refer to it as the Mini Victorian, as the fan does, to an extent, resemble a scaled-down version of the Casablanca Victorian. As the motor housing is smaller, but still has an ornate faceplate, and the blade span was oftentimes smaller, as this fan is oftentimes seen with the smaller blade size, making it only 40 inches in diameter, though it can also be seen with the larger blade size, making it 50 inches in diameter, so hardly any smaller than a Victorian. This model was introduced in 1983 under the name Cambridge 13,000, and stuck around until about 1989 or so, before it was discontinued. And for some reason this model was always kind of swept under the rug. It wasn't as heavily advertised as many of the other models, and the reason for that I'm not entirely sure, and I think that's kind of unfortunate, as the Cambridge is one of my favorite Casablanca models. Those who watch my videos regularly know that the Four Seasons is my all-time favorite model, but the Cambridge is definitely up there, definitely in the top 5, maybe even the top 3. As the Cambridge is kind of like the Victorian equivalent to a Four Seasons, how, like I said, Cambridge is sometimes called the Mini Victorian, a Four Seasons could be called a Mini Zephyr. Has the same top faceplate that Casablanca Lady Deltas have. And it has a K4S on it as well. Tag is over on this side. And this is a first-year model, meaning it's from 1983. And it does utilize the slumber quiet control system, which is still working. I got this fan from John Connelly during the Fanimation trip of 2022, and he went through and gave this fan new bearings and cleaned it up very nicely, so it's in tip-top shape, which is always lovely to see. We'll go ahead and demonstrate the light. Currently has a mix of incandescent and LED bulbs in the sockets. It was just what I had lying around. As thankfully LED bulbs do not mess up a slumber quiet board in my experience. Then we'll start the fan up as slow as it can go. I've mentioned this before, but one other aspect of the Cambridge I really like is the blade iron design. The way it has the filled-in ornate blade irons. I've always thought those were really neat looking, and I kind of wish they used them on more models, though at the same time the fact that they use them on so few models also makes them more rare and special. As models like the Commodore Vanderbilt and the Broadway Limited had a slightly different version of that same design, but the only two models to use that specific design were this one and the Century 9000. And funny enough, those were also the only two models to ever have their model number included in the name, as the Century was called the Century 9000 officially for its run from 81 to 84, and then the Cambridge was called the 13,000 during its first year, but then they just dropped the 13,000 and just started calling it Cambridge when they switched this model over to IntelliTouch. So, a bit of an interesting parallel there. Almost makes me wonder if maybe the Cambridge was kind of meant to be like a replacement for the Century, as the Century was Also another model that wasn't that heavily advertised by Casablanca. And we'll turn it up a little bit. In actuality, I doubt the Cambridge was meant to be a Century 9000 replacement, as there was about a year or 2 years of overlap between the two models, but nevertheless, they are kind of in the same wheelhouse, as they were ornate models that didn't get quite as much love as some of the more mainstream models, or just some of the more popular models. And this fan is absolutely silent. As the bearings were recently replaced, it has zero bearing noise, and thankfully there is no subtle motor hum from the slumber quiet on this one, so no noise, none whatsoever. Slumber quiet knob is a little bit stiff on this one, so that's the one teeny tiny nitpick I have about it. This fan came with everything you see on it now except for the light shades. I don't believe this fan came with a set of light shades when I bought it, though I might be remembering wrong. Oftentimes, though, I kind of prefer to get fans without light shades on them, as I already have way too many as it is. And there, we're just shy of full speed. And then there's full speed. And zero noise other than the sound of wind being blown around. Barring the LED bulbs, this is what it must have felt like to be installing a brand new Casablanca fan back in the 1980s. This fan is absolutely gorgeous. And there you have it, an antique brass Casablanca Cambridge, 50 inches, slumber quiet.